Hey there, I'm your imaginary friend. I have a story for you today. This is by William Butler Yeats. Now, as always, bear in mind that sometimes an author will have included something in their work that at the time of writing seemed fine to them, and it's not always fine. This is called Red Hanrahan. It's the first in a series of Stories of Red Hanrahan. Hanrahan, the hedge schoolmaster, a tall, strong, red-haired young man, came into the barn where some of the men of the village were sitting on Samhain Eve. It had been a dwelling house, and when the man that owned it had built a better one, he had put the two rooms together and kept it for a place to store one thing or another. There was a fire on the old hearth, and there were dip candles stuck in bottles, and there was a black quart bottle upon some boards that had been put across two barrels to make a table. Most of the men were sitting beside the fire, and one of them was singing a long, wandering song about a Munster man and a Connaught man that were quarrelling about their two provinces. Hanrahan went to the man of the house and said, "I got your message." But when he had said that, he stopped, for an old mountainy man that had a shirt and trousers of unbleached flannel, and that was sitting himself near the door, was looking at him, moving an old pack of cards about in his hand, and muttering. "Don't mind him," said the man of the house. "He is only some stranger come in a while ago, and we bade him welcome, being Samhain night. But I think he's not in his right wits. Listen to him now, and you'll hear what he's saying." They listened then, and they could hear the old man muttering to himself as he turned the cards. Spade and diamonds, courage and power, clubs and hearts, knowledge and pleasure. "That's the kind of talk he's been going on with for the last hour," said the man of the house, and Hanrahan turned his eyes from the old man as if he did not like to be looking at him. "I got your message," Hanrahan said then. "He's in the barn with his three first cousins from Kilcreast," the messenger said, "and there are some of the neighbors with them." "It was my cousin over there is wanting to see you," said the man of the house, and he called over a young frieze-coated man who was listening to the song and said, "This is Red Hanrahan you have the message for." "It is a kind message indeed," said the young man, "for it comes from your sweetheart, Mary Lavelle." "How would you get a message from her, and what do you know of her?" "I don't know her, indeed, but I was in Longray yesterday, and a neighbor of hers that had some dealings with me was saying that she bade him send you word, if he met anyone from this side of the market, that her mother has died from her, and if you have a mind yet to join with herself, she's willing to keep her word to you." "I will go to her, indeed," said Hanrahan. "And she bade you make no delay, for if she has not a man in the house before the month is out, it is likely the little bit of land will be given to another." When Hanrahan heard that, he rose up from the bench he had sat down on. "I will make no delay, indeed," he said. "There's a full moon, and if I get as far as Gilchrist tonight, I will reach to her before the setting of the sun tomorrow." When the others heard that, they began to laugh at him for being in such haste to go to his sweetheart, and one asked him if he would leave his school in the old lime kiln, where he was giving the children such good learning. But he said the children would be glad enough in the morning to find the place empty, and no one to keep them at their task. And as for his school, he could set it up again in any place, having as he had his little inkpot hanging from his neck by a chain, and his big Virgil and his primer in the skirt of his coat. Some of them asked him to drink a glass before he went, and a young man caught hold of his coat and said he must not leave them without singing the song he had made in praise of Venus and of Mary Lavelle. He drank a glass of whiskey, but he said he would not stop, but would set out on his journey. "There's time enough, Red Hanrahan," said the man of the house. "It'll be time enough for you to give up sport when you are after your marriage, and it might be a long time before we'll see you again." "I will not stop," said Hanrahan. "My mind would be on the roads all the time, bringing me to the woman that sent for me, and she lonesome and watching till I come." Some of the others came about him, pressing him that had been such a pleasant comrade, so full of songs and every kind of trick and fun, not to leave them till the night would be over. But he refused them all, and shook them off, and went to the door. But as he put his foot over the threshold, the strange old man stood up, and put his hand, that was thin and withered like a bird's claw, on Hanrahan's hand, and said, "It is not Hanrahan, the learned man and the great song-maker, that should go out from a gathering like this on a Samhain night." Stop here now, he said, and play a hand with me. And here is an old pack of cards has done its work many a night before this. And old as it is, there's been much of the riches of the world lost and won over it. One of the young men said, "It isn't much of the riches of the world is stuffed with yourself, old man." And he looked at the old man's bare feet, and they all laughed. But Hanrahan did not laugh, but he sat down very quietly without a word. Then one of them said, "So he will stop with us after all, Hanrahan?" And the old man said, "He will stop indeed. Did you not hear me asking him?" They all looked at the old man then, as if wondering where he came from. "It is far I come from," he said. "Through France I've come, and through Spain, and by Loughgrain of the Hidden Mouth, and none has refused me anything." And then he was silent, and nobody liked to question him, and they began to play. There were 6 men at the boards playing, and others were looking on behind. They played 2 or 3 games for nothing, and then the old man took a 4-penny bit, worn very thin and smooth, out from his pocket, and he called to the rest to put something on the game. And they all put down something on the boards, and little as it was, it looked much from the way it was shoved from one to the other. First one man winning it, and then his neighbour, and sometimes the luck would go against a man, and he would have nothing left. And then one or another would lend him something, and he would pay it again out of his winnings, for neither good nor bad luck stopped long with anyone. And once Hanrahan said, as a man would say in a dream, "It is time for me to be going the road." But just then a good card came to him, and he played it out, and all the money began to come to him. And once he thought of Mary Lavelle, and he sighed, and that time his luck went from him, and he forgot her again. But at last the luck went to the old man, and it stayed with him, and all they had flowed into him, and he began to laugh little laughs to himself, and to sing over and over to himself, "Spades and diamonds, courage and power," and so on, as if it was a verse of a song. And after a while, anyone looking at the men, and seeing the way their bodies were rocking to and fro, and the way they kept their eyes on the old man's hands, would think they had drink taken, or that the whole store they had in the world was put on the cards. But that was not so, for the quart bottle had not been disturbed since the game began, and was nearly full yet. And all that was on the game was a few 6-penny bits and shillings, and maybe a handful of coppers. "You're good men to win, and good men to lose," said the old man. "You have play in your hearts." He began then to shuffle the cards, and to mix them very quick and fast, till at last they could not see them to be cards at all, but you would think him to be making rings of fire in the air, as little lads would make them with whirling a lighted stick. And after that it seemed to them that all the room was dark, and they could see nothing but his hands and the cards. And all in a minute a hare made a leap out from between his hands, and whether it was one of the cards that took that shape, or whether it was made out of nothing in the palms of his hands, nobody knew. But there it was, running on the floor of the barn as quick as any hare that ever lived. Some looked at the hare, but more kept their eyes on the old man, and while they were looking at him, a hound made a leap out between his hands, the same way as the hare did, and after that another hound, and another, till there was a whole pack of them, following the hare round and round the barn. The players were all standing up now, with their backs to the boards, shrinking from the hounds, and nearly deafened with the noise of their yelping. But as quick as the hounds were, they could not overtake the hare. But it went round, till at last it seemed as if a blast of wind burst open the barn door, and the hare doubled and made a leap over the boards where the men had been playing, and went out of the door, and away through the night, and the hounds over the boards and through the doors after it. Then the old man called out, follow the hounds, and it is a great hunt you will see tonight." And he went out after them. But used as the men were to go hunting after hares, and ready as they were for any sport, they were in dread to go out into the night. And it was only Hanrahan that rose up, and that said, I will follow on." "You had best stop here, Hanrahan," the young man that was nearest him said, "for you might be going to some great danger." But Hanrahan said, "I will see fair play. I will see fair play." And then he went stumbling out the door, like a man in a dream, and the door shut after him as he went. He thought he saw the old man in front of him, but it was only his own shadow that the full moon cast on the road before him. But he could hear the hounds crying after the hare over the wide green fields of Granach, and he followed them very fast, for there was nothing to stop him. And after a while he came to smaller fields that had little walls of loose stones around them, and he threw the stones down as he crossed them, and did not wait to put them up again. And he passed by the place where the river goes under the ground at Ballylee, and he could hear the hounds going before him up towards the head of the river. Soon he found it harder to run, for it was uphill he was going, and clouds came over the moon, and it was hard for him to see his way. And once he left the path to take a short cut, but his foot slipped into a bog hole, and he had to come back to it. And how long he was going he did not know, or what way he went, but at last he was up on the bare mountain, with nothing but the rough heather about him, and he could neither hear the hounds nor any other thing. But their cry began to come to him again, at first far off, and then very near, and when it came quite close to him, it went up, all of a sudden, into the air, and there was the sound of hunting over his head. And then it went away northward, till he could hear nothing more at all. "That's not fair," he said. "That's not fair." And he could walk no longer, but sat down on the heather where he was, in the heart of Slieve Echte, for all the strength had gone out from him, with the dint of the long journey he had made. And after a while he took notice that there was a door close to him, and a light coming from it, and he wondered that, being so close to him, he had not seen it before. And he rose up, and tired as he was, he went in at the door, and although it was night time outside, it was daylight he found within. And presently he met with an old man that had been gathering summer thyme and yellow flag flowers, and it seemed as if all the sweet smells of the summer were with them. And the old man said, "It is a long time you have been coming to us, Hanrahan, the learned man and the great song-maker." And with that he brought him into a big shining house, and every grand thing Hanrahan had ever heard of, and every colour he'd ever seen, were in it. There was a high place at the end of the house, and on it there was sitting in a high chair a woman, the most beautiful the world ever saw, having a long pale face and flowers about it, but she had the tired look of one that had been long waiting. And there was sitting on the step below her chair 4 grey old women, and the one of them was holding a great cauldron in her lap, and another a great stone on her knees, and heavy as it was, it seemed light to her. And another of them had a very long spear that was made of pointed wood, and the last of them had a sword that was without a scabbard. Hanrahan stood looking at them for a long time, but none of them spoke any word to him or looked at him at all. And he had it in his mind to ask who that woman in the chair was that was like a queen, and what she was waiting for. But ready as he was with his tongue, and afraid of no person, he was in dread now to speak to so beautiful a woman, and in so grand a place. And then he thought to ask what were the 4 things the 4 grey old women were holding like great treasures, but he could not think of the right words to bring out. Then the first of the old women rose up, holding the cauldron between her 2 hands, and she said, "Pleasure." And Hanrahan said no word. Then the second old woman rose up with a stone in her hands, and she said, "Power." And the third old woman rose up with a spear in her hand, and she said, "Courage." And the last of the old women rose up, having the sword in her hands, and she said, "Knowledge." And everyone, after she had spoken, waited as if for Hanrahan to question her. But he said nothing at all. Then the 4 old women went out of the door, bringing their 4 treasures with them, and as they went out, one of them said, "He has no wish for us." And another said, "He is weak, he is weak." And another said, "He is afraid." And the last said, "His wits are gone from him." And then they all said, "Echte, daughter of the Silver Hand, must stay in her sleep. It is a pity. It is a great pity." And then the woman that was like a queen gave a very sad sigh, and it seemed to Hanrahan as if the sigh had the sound in it of hidden streams, and if the place he was in had been 10 times grander and more shining than it was, he could not have hindered sleep from coming on him, and he staggered like a drunken man and lay down there and then. When Hanrahan awoke, the sun was shining on his face, but there was white frost on the grass around him, and there was ice on the edge of the stream he was lying by, and that goes running on through Dare Coil and Drim de Rod. He knew by the shape of the hills, and by the shining of Loughgrain in the distance, that he was upon one of the hills of Slieve Echte, but he was not sure how he came there, for all that had happened in the barn had gone from him, and all his journey, but the soreness of his feet and the stiffness in his bones. It was a year after that. There were men of the village of Capachtaigl sitting by the fire in a house on the roadside, and Red Hanrahan was now very thin and worn, and his hair very long and wild, came to the half-door and asked leave to come in and rest himself. And they bid him welcome, because it was Samhain night. He sat down with them, and they gave him a glass of whisky out of a quart bottle, and they saw the little ink pot hanging about his neck, and he knew he was a scholar, and asked for stories about the Greeks. He took the Virgil out of the big pocket of his coat, but the cover was very black and swollen with the wet, and the page, when he opened it, was very yellow. But that was no great matter, for he looked at it like a man that had never learned to read. Some young man that was there began to laugh at him then, and to ask why did he carry so heavy a book with him when he was not able to read it. It vexed Hanrahan to hear that, and he put the Virgil back in his pocket, and asked if they had a pack of cards among them, for cards were better than books. When they brought out the cards, he took them and began to shuffle them. While he was shuffling them, something seemed to come into his mind. And he put his hand to his face, like one that is trying to remember, and he said, "Was I ever here before? Or where was I on a night like this?" Then of a sudden he stood up and let the cards fall to the floor, and he said, "Who was it brought me a message from Mary Lavelle?" "We never saw you before now, and we never heard of Mary Lavelle," said the man of the house. "And who is she?" he said. "And what is it you're talking about?" "It was this night, a year ago. I was in a barn, and there were men playing cards, and there was money on the table. They were pushing it from one to another, here and there, and I got a message, and I was going out of the door to look for my sweetheart that wanted me, Mary Lavelle." And then Hanrahan called out very loud, "Where have I been since then? Where was I for a whole year?" "It's hard to say where you might have been in that time," said the oldest of the men, "or what part of the world you may have travelled. And it is like enough that you have the dust of many roads on your feet, for there are many go wandering and forgetting like that," he said, "when once they've been given the touch." "That is true," said another of the men. "I knew a woman went wandering like that through the length of 7 years. She came back after, and she told her friends she had often been glad enough to eat the food that was put in the pig's trough. And it is best for you to go to the priest now," he said, "and let him take off you whatever may have been put upon you." "It's to my sweetheart I will go, to Mary Lavelle," said Hanrahan. "It's too long I have delayed. How do I know what might have happened to her in the length of a year?" He was going out of the door then, but they all told him it was best for him to stop the night, and to get strength for the journey. And indeed he wanted that, for he was very weak. And when they gave him food, he ate it like a man that had never seen food before. And one of them said, "He's eating as if he'd trodden on the hungry grass." It was in the white light of the morning he set out, and the time seemed long to him till he could get to Mary Lavelle's house. But when he came to it, he found the door broken, and the thatch dropping from the roof, and no living person to be seen. And when he asked the neighbors what had happened to her, all they could say was that she'd been put out of the house and had married some labouring man, and they'd gone looking for work to London or Liverpool or some big place. And whether she found a worse place or a better, he never knew. But anyway, he never met with her or with news of her again.